Genie a Logee, and I always like to share what I know. What do I know? Well, today, I know it's time to start a new series that will pop up now and again. We call it Tour of the World, or TOTWA for short. Or maybe we'll just stick with Tour of the World. What a big place the world is, and how small as well. Even before the internet, we were all connected, either by water or land. Farther back than you can imagine, people traveled, they moved, they settled. Their descendants got bored and moved on. They arrived at new territories. They fought with the inhabitants there. Sometimes they got along. They intermarried, sometimes they stayed. They were immigrants, people who arrived. But of course they left a previous home. When they left, they were emigrants. Fast forward to modern times, like 300 years ago and forward, people traveled by land to seaports, and then sailed away to their new home. Factina, can you tell us about some of those ports and cities?
I'd love to. To simplify a very complex subject, most of the mass migrations of people who traveled by ship to the United States happened between the 1700s and the 1900s. In the 1700s, English speakers left from the ports of London, Bristol, and Liverpool in England. German speakers left from Rotterdam and Amsterdam, and Belfast and Londonderry were common ports for the Irish. A great percentage of the immigration to the United States took place in the 1800s. People left from ports in England, Germany, and France, many having traveled there by land from Russia, Central Europe, and Italy. So, Genie, after they left as emigrants, where did they arrive as immigrants?
They came mostly to New York, but to many other ports as well. And some landed in Halifax, Nova Scotia, then made their way south to America. African slaves were brought mostly to Charleston and New Orleans. Now, I want to tell you about an absolutely wonderful website that will give you mountains of information about ports, ships, and their passengers through the centuries. You'll find other useful information there as well. https://stevemorse.org. Another place to do your research is at the Ellis Island website. Ellis Island in New York was open from 1892 to 1954 officially. However, the peak years were from 1918 to 1924. You can search for your ancestors at the website called the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island Foundation, and the web addresses https://www.statueofliberty.org. And once again, we head to the National Archives, this time to their website about immigration. You can learn about everything related to immigration and how to find your ancestors. https://www.archives.gov/research/immigration.
So after they got here, what happened to them? Memes? Boy, oh boy, what did they do?
Hello, Bob. People mostly came to the eastern part of what we now call the United States of America and headed west. They traveled in many different ways that we'll talk about in future episodes. Often they found a place they liked and settled there with people from the same country that they came from. They formed communities. Some people stayed there the rest of their lives, some moved on.
But why did they leave their homes in the first place?
There were many different reasons. They left for economic reasons. If the oldest son inherited the farm, what were the other sons to do? They left for religious freedom or to join relatives who were already here. They left to escape prosecution for a crime they committed. They left because they heard the streets were lined with gold. And many found there was no gold, but instead, fields lined with train tracks that they laid down themselves after being put to work soon after they got here.
You are right. Not every immigrant has a happy story to tell. How hard it must have been to leave home and family behind. When they got here, they were often discriminated against. Some were very successful eventually. Some didn't even make it here since so many people died on the ships along the way, or they were turned back and not let in for being sick or undesirable. And many were taken by force from their villages. In a future episode, we'll talk about how to find ancestors who were slaves. There are lots of good ways to research your African heritage nowadays, something we thought was impossible not so long ago.
Thank you, Factina. Today we've covered some interesting ground, much easier than the ground our ancestors covered in their travels. The websites we listed regarding ships, ports, and cities are full of interesting facts and ways to search. And so ends part 1 of our Tour of the World series. As we continue this series, we'll focus on specific countries or areas of migration. In episode 8, we'll talk about the Native Americans who were already here when the Europeans and others arrived, but even Native Americans traveled, and the Native Americans of today are descendants of other groups of people. We humans sure can't sit still, can we? Wouldn't you love to have a time machine to see how it all happened and get to know about every culture and community that led up to the world of today? Story Lady, what do you have for us today?
Well, I don't have a time machine, but I do have a couple of absolutely true stories about immigrants who came here and couldn't speak English yet. Both involve mysteries and confusion. You see, Lucene's grandfather came to the United States around the turn of the 20th century from Armenia. When he walked down the street, people would pass him and say, "Hi!" He thought, how did they know? You might ask, how did they know what? Well, it turns out that the word hi in English sounds like the Armenian word hi, which means Armenian. So he wondered how these strangers knew he was Armenian. But he soon learned English and understood the confusion. And then there's my friend Ruby. A few years ago, Ruby, a recent immigrant, went to the store to buy cereal. And on the shelf was a box of cornflakes with a picture on the front of the box of a nice big bowl of cereal topped with bright red, delicious-looking strawberries. Ruby bought the box, took it home, and poured the cereal into a bowl. And no strawberries! Ruby hadn't learned English very well yet and couldn't read the words next to the picture, serving suggestion. Some stories are sad, some are funny. We could go on, but mostly I hope you can find out about the travels of your own ancestors and discover a story or two about them. Now I want strawberries. Off to the kitchen I go! How in the world did that get there?